Hello and welcome to the GAN project. I am Kedar Nimkar. Today's guest is a filmmaker, cinematographer, and educator, Mazhar Kamran. He's known for his work for iconic films like Satya, Mohandas, and more. Mazhar also teaches cinema to young storytellers at FTI and IDC. In this episode, we deep dive into what storytelling really means, the role of education in cinema, and how to stay creatively grounded in the age of reels, shorts, and AI. If you're a filmmaker, designer, or anyone curious about art and craft of meaningful storytelling, this episode is for you. Let's begin. Welcome, Mazhar, to the GAN project, and thanks for giving your time. It's a honor to have you on the show.
Hi, yeah, I'm happy to join you on this.
The topic of the day, as I spoke in the introduction, will be around filmmaking and your thoughts about general what is storytelling and so on and so forth. So I'll directly jump into first question is that you moved between filmmaking, cinematography, teaching, writing. So could you start by just helping with your definition of storytelling? How would you define storytelling?
Storytelling to me has meant a way of making sense of the world. Actually, I, the appeal of storytelling was from that angle, and I think what I've understood, is that it is a way where you can share that understanding, which is a very concentrated form of sharing through fiction. I look at it as basically making sense of the world and then sharing it with everybody.
But was there a moment in your career or any specific project that kind of triggered this thought? Because you mentioned fiction while
Yes.
you have worked in documentaries and other
So,
stuff. So,
yeah, so this happened actually in my early days where I was still yet to graduate, and I began watching films, and that is when it hit me that this medium is so powerful, in the way I just said for storytelling. That is when the thought came that this is where I want to be, in this. When I was in college, I happened to get exposed to a certain kind of cinema. Before that, I had not much interest in films, and I always thought of myself as a student of science and physics in particular. But I went to these screenings, and they fascinated me as a medium. That look, what a wonderful medium to look at the world and then engage everybody in this. Sort of experience, and there are certain films. I remember one film in particular which stood out, which was a Herzog film. I even remember the title. It was called The Enigma of Caspar Hauser. And when I saw that movie, I was like, this is wonderful. So I went to the screening of this film, and I didn't know anything about the director, etc. I just saw the film, and I was, very intrigued that this is what you could do with this medium. I had not imagined cinema to be like that. And then it was a faint thought that maybe I should be learning more about it. Actually, at that point, it wasn't about joining filmmaking or any such thing, because it was too early. But definitely I wanted to explore it a lot more.
hmm, hmm.
So this one film kind of triggered it, and that journey has continued, and I'm happy that I took that decision to gradually go closer and closer to it.
But within that film, also any particular aspect of like storytelling, because typically visuals you get to that first, right? And it's a very visual medium also. So,
Yeah, it was just the concept, and such a concept could be put on film so well. The concept was that a man who has grown up in the wilderness without any contact with human society, imagine if such a person is suddenly put in the center of the city, what will happen?
hmm,
So
hmm,
fascinating. And he kind of that image is that this man who's not seen another human being
hmm,
and society or any such thing is brought and placed in the middle of a city square, and he just freezes.
hmm,
And
hmm.
from there the story begins.
And you, I believe, if I've done my research a bit, you started off with cinematography, if
Yes.
I'm not wrong. So, any particular insight about understanding the power of images itself, like in storytelling?
So I wanted to do cinematography more as a way to uh, have some expertise, some hard knowledge,
Hmm,
because I thought direction was a kind of different kind of knowledge, which was very individual, which has to be developed in a very personal sense. Whereas something like cinematography, I could just get trained. I could pick up the medium through cinematography, and I could be at the heart of filmmaking in terms of its technicalities and come to grips with that. So that is the motivation, you can say, for choosing cinematography in the early years. I've seen with that is that I'm able to see a story translate onto screen more fluidly because of my training. I don't have to struggle much on that, so
Hmm.
translating from story from the page to the visual comes more organically.
Hmm.
Having mastered that particular part, of working with this cinematography with lenses, cameras, movements, light. So that I think has been a great help.
You've kind of explored fiction, documentary, short form, long form. Seems like
Yeah.
worn many hats. So,
So
any
yeah,
reason?
it's so I can tell you what drives me towards each of these. See, documentary, again, in my early days, what I wanted to do was learn. I think documentary. I looked at it as a way to just go with the crew and find out whatever that interests you. See, people
Hmm.
will open their doors to you. If you just go and ask anyone, they may not, who are you, why are you asking me all this,
Hmm. Hmm.
but if I say I'm making a documentary, and then people are more welcoming, and you can ask questions, you can investigate, you can learn. And so I joined this program at the time, which was fascinating, called Surabhi,
Hmm.
Siddharth Kak's program.
Renuka
And
Chan.
I joined it not as a cinematographer, in fact. So the first job that I did was not in cinematography; was in making, almost like reportage kind of
Okay.
work.
Hmm.
And I took it. I call it my discovery of India.
Hmm.
Those are my discovery of India years, where I was just traveling from Bihar, Sasaram to somewhere Almora, all across length and breadth of the country,
Hmm.
doing these what we call stories. And these were basically, you can say, journalistic pieces, except that they were not about news, but they were about some cultural aspect or the other,
Hmm.
which was not so well known, but which was rooted in that region,
Hmm.
in that
Hmm.
particular region. So you had to go there and get it.
Yeah.
So I even went, I mean, places like Bastar and so on.
Hmm.
For the first time, I saw what a market in a tribal area would look like. Probably the way it has been for centuries. You can still go to such places and see that atmosphere of a bazaar, which is completely like ancient.
Hmm.
People are selling some kind of insects on leaves over there, which you can eat, which are edible. So
Hmm.
those kind of things sort of opened the eyes to the richness of in India itself, and also the cultural side of it. I mean, I went to see the Konark temple and the Shersha Suri mausoleum. So there was this cultural, historical aspect to it also. So that
Hmm.
is the great thing about documentary, that it can be very educative. You can learn while making documentaries.
Hmm.
For fiction, of course, you can say it was the first attraction, because the cinema that attracted me was fiction. And fiction, I believe, gives you much more freedom in expression. Documentaries, kind of, it ties you. There is a certain frame,
Hmm.
of reality, that you have to function within that. You can do a few things, but you're kind of bound by that. Whereas fiction is so free, and so much more you can do with imagination. And I've always loved this aspect. So for me, if you ask me, I'm like a fiction person. I like to work in fiction, be in that world, create in that world. Documentary is kind of a secondary thing that I've done. So for instance, if I'm interested in writers, I went ahead and made documentaries on writers I admired, like Kurutil Haider and Nayyar Masood, whom I had read. They are
Hmm.
great storytellers in Urdu literature. They won the highest awards in the country. Case of Kurutil Haider, the Gyanpith Award. Case of Nayyar Masood, the Saraswati Samman. These are the highest literary awards. And I was able to, like I said, they would open their doors. And I was very young those days, but they would open their doors and be ready to discuss. Not entirely, I'm sort of simplifying it.
Hmm.
There was some struggle there. Ultimately, they did open their, heart and mind to.
So yeah, when you make these shifts from say fiction, documentary, is there any core creative impulse or like guiding principle that you follow through?
So I have hardly done any commission other than you know, something that has triggered me. I have not. Somebody has not asked me to make a documentary, and I have gone and done it. That kind of thing I have not done. I have done in people documentaries on people or places which has triggered something in me,
Hmm.
and then gone ahead and sought permission, sought funding, and got that done.
Hmm.
So they
No,
are
I'm
always emanated from something within that.
yeah, I'm in fact I was asking that what's that
Hmm.
within thing which keeps coming up saying that like the author theory or like whatever, there is some signature of
There,
every work, right?
so I don't know. I have not analyzed it like that. What is it that if there is any common, except curiosity would be the thing, but
Hmm.
not curiosity about everything. Certain things, curiosity to know, to find out. That would be the thing, and to connect the dots. That would be the thing. So I see very little, that between science and art. Very little sort of difference. People make a big deal of that this is science, that is art. To me it's all one.
Hmm.
They are all the part of, if you want to generalize, as in my what is the core. So like, even though I've been in science and I've been in so called like art, say, so they are all the same. Basically they are like, you look at the world in a certain way and you want to find out more, and you want to connect the dots. This is the universal
Beautiful.
thing, I think, which resonates with me, and I think which is what a person of science, if you ask, also would say, that isn't it? Artist would say that finally that is what it is.
Beautiful, beautiful. In fact, I resonated with on
Hmm.
multiple levels because that's what the GAN project is trying to do also. Like just
Yeah,
have
yes,
multiple perspectives, but just find the underlying thread.
underlying thread. Yeah.
No, so if you could tell me, so Safar mein Sheher, and then let's Mohandas, like what do you see as a common thread there? What is the seed behind these films?
I'll tell you, as we talk, maybe I'll discover it. Mohandas, let me see what prompted Mohandas. Mohandas was prompted by a conversation with the author.
Hmm.
He was at my house even before he had written the story. Uday Prakash, who's a brilliant short story writer in Hindi, and he had just come from his village, and he said that he has come across this strange case and he's planning to write about it. And then he narrated that there is this man who has been trying to prove that he's himself,
Yeah.
and the courts would not accept it, and it took him 12 years
Hmm.
to prove that he's himself.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I said, "Wow, this is wonderful. This can be a nice film." Just like that, I said, and Uday and I were working on some other script. I said, "This can be a good film." So then we forgot about it. He went and wrote it, published it in, I think, Hans, and then such is serendipity. Producer met him and said he wants to make this particular story into a film. And then he remembered this conversation and said, "You should go and meet Mazhar, he likes his story." And that's how it started. So then I told Uday one thing, that would you mind, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the story, because what triggered it that time, I want to sort of retain that, and let's develop a story together.
Hmm.
Not like
The
this
book.
is this is the novel or a long short story that you have published and we are adapting it. Let's look at it as something which inspired this and leads to a
Very good.
film, and let's work on a draft and then leave it to me free to take it as a film, because film is my medium,
Hmm. Hmm.
so this with this understanding we began, and of course we went through that process of producer taking the rights and so on. So anyway, I have digressed from the main point, which is that material about life being so bizarre, about connecting the dots, which I said,
Hmm.
that life is so bizarre, and a person has to struggle such a basic thing, and the judicial system can't handle it. I mean, what is this? I mean, your judicial system is supposed to preserve other rights. I mean, your right to this, your right to that, but this, that I am Mazhar Kamran, that person is not Mazhar Kamran, I am Mazhar Kamran. Now, this is, if judicial systems can't handle this, so that absurdity of it and all that was very exciting.
Hmm.
And again, maybe somewhere this, if you want to connect, maybe like Kaspar Hauser was also sort of, what is it to be a human being, kind of a thing. So maybe those things trigger me. Whereas Safar Mein Sheher is about trying to connect the dots today in a big metropolitan city. I've always thought that storytelling is too bound by ancient patterns. We keep referring to that. It's good. I mean, I don't deny that value in that. But then, how do we deal with contemporary experiences? How do we deal with today, here and now? How would that storytelling be?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I took up this idea that, and I've lived in Bombay for decades and I know it more than any other city. I have two cities I can claim to know very well, which is Bombay and Lucknow. And in that, Bombay takes a larger chunk. So I said, okay, Bombay as a city, I've grown up, my childhood, my working years, early college, and now professional life. I know this city quite well. Let me, do something with this city. The idea came that, people are constantly moving about in the city. What is going on in their lives? There's so many people on the roads. Bombay is like that, hustle and bustle, we say, it's
Yeah.
people are pushing each other literally, and it's all about movement, at one level. Bombay is like that. It's a very crowded city. Lot what is going on in, imagine, what is going on in their lives, each one, what is going on, what are their aspirations, thoughts, anxieties, fears, what are their dreams, so many
Hmm.
people. So let's do something with this. That was the origin, and then I wrote a few stories about a few people, because of course you can't talk about 21 million people in a film.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you pick, so just like that, I whatever interesting stories came to me, collaborated with a writer, Pramod, and Pramod and I kind of thrashed out several drafts. Pretty tough. It was not, in the sense, what I mean is, it's easier to tell a story with a proper narrative, there's a beginning, middle, end. But then if you take so many lives and you're trying to put it all together, quite a thing. I mean,
Hmm.
to make it coherent as a story. So
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in this. It must make sense as a coherent piece, as an organic whole. I can't just say that it's about random people and it's a random. No, no.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be satisfied with that. Some people might. So I love that craft of storytelling, that you need to shape that material. It's your
Hmm.
material.
Hmm.
I mean, finally, we look at it like that. It may sound strange, but it's material that we are shaping as much as somebody's shaping with mud some statue. It's a material. Finally, we
Hmm.
look at it like that, and I said, let's give it that shape which will work as a story, as a unified story. So we did that. We took some time. It took time. What was surprising is that even it took time in at the editing stage, which is quite unexpected. I thought, okay, now that we have sorted it on paper, we just shoot it and it'll all work. We were very surprised, because that's the medium actually. Film as a medium, putting it together is when it actually is born. The film is born actually on the editing table.
Hmm.
People have said it. It's nothing new, I'm saying, but that's good. That struggle is good. So out of that, something interesting emerges.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's how Safar Mein Sheher. So there were different impulses, you can say, for both. I don't think there's something common. One is this idea of looking at that absurdity
Hmm.
of that situation, and the judicial system being unable to deal with it, and ultimately proving that it's just a system. It's
Hmm.
not a way of dispensing justice. It should
Correct.
be that is what I think. I'm not a legal person, or but there is that some articles are there in the constitution, no,
Hmm.
which kind of I think override everything else that the highest court can exercise,
Hmm.
wherein they don't have to bother about anything, that in the interest of justice we do this. There is some article, I think 142, I'm not sure, you can but there
Yeah,
is
I read
that.
it.
So
Hmm.
I mean, and there were wise people who put this, that they realized You can get caught up in all of this, but then at lower courts you can't do that. So this man was struggling in the lower courts, so that brought out the absurdity of it.
I got my answer here because, as you said, curiosity. I was just re-looking at some old episodes I've interviewed, and I interviewed Ramu Ramanathan, the playwright,
Oh, you
and
did. I happen to know him. He's a good, I mean, a good friend. I would say not that we meet often, but
Mhm.
yeah, we connect.
So yeah, I mean, in his thing, I just like stumbled upon it that he was saying a good playwright like P.D. James, she when she was a young school-going girl, somebody said Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and she asked who pushed it. So that who did the act is a curious thing, and I think your
Yeah,
answer also
you pushed.
connects there.
Yeah,
Yeah, who pushed Humpty Dumpty
yeah.
is a interesting.
That's what you need. You need some trigger like that, to
Hmm.
drive
Hmm.
you. That's the way I am, I think.
Correct. Yeah.
And to tell you one more story, like Nilani, which is a short film I
Yeah.
did.
I was
I
going to
think
ask
now
that.
I can see the pattern, because if we talk about Nilani, it was a small news item which I read in a newspaper. Yeah,
Hmm.
hardly, just a small few centimeters by few centimeters, just like that. There was this, it's an incident in Maharashtra that a woman had poisoned an entire family when they were sort of, that housewarming. When they came to live in a new house, they do some ceremony.
Hmm.
At that ceremonial thing, she went and poisoned them. And why? Because of what they had done to her life as a bahu, as a daughter-in-law. And I said, why would a person do that? And it seemed it's because she said they didn't like it because I was so dark. I said, what a thing, like, somebody is very dark, somebody is married to somebody, and the person is tortured to this extent that it leads this person to do such a horrific thing. So it's a proper, it can be a film. And of course, it's not in the horror. The interest is in why it happens, like you just said,
Hmm. Hmm.
why, who pushed her to it exactly, that question kind of, people, sort of simple people will look at it and say, what is this, you're making a gory thing, murder, killing, what is fascinating? But any murder story, you're not interested in murder, murder is an event. It's just that it piques people's interest, so you kind of take it up, but it is actually what led to it.
Hmm.
And in that question lies a lot to discover, understand, reveal about society, isn't it?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that who did it or why they did it
Correct.
is the question that sort of kind of got me, that I should make this as a film. And what I do when I get excited like this is I call up a few people and say, look, this seems exciting, do you think it will make a good film? I think it will make a good film. Do you think so? So I want some validation, yeah. And from some people I trust, of course. And when I hear that, yeah, yeah, this is very nice, you should, this can be a good film, you
Hmm.
really must.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So then I go further, and I did that, and I was lucky that that film happened. And that, so again, serendipity is a word. So that plays a role. I'm a great believer in some of these kind of mysterious things, intuition, this kind of chance discoveries, like with Uday. With this, I had this conversation and I forgot about it, because in the sense, okay, we'll wait for the right opportunity. And making a film is not like, I'm not like loaded with money and I'll just go out and hire
Hmm.
and do it. So you kind of sit on it. And it so happened that FTI around that time invited me to a workshop, and they said, would you direct a film for our acting students? Okay, interesting. So I went there. Then they said, first, we must do an exercise of adapting a story. Would you do that workshop? I said, wow, this is getting somewhere. So I gave them this story, which I wrote, I put it down, and I said, let's adapt this story. I created a fictional story out of it. And six,
This is for Nalini or like
Nilani. This is Nilani. This
Nilani,
is
Nilani. Yeah.
Nilani. So then I gave that name, Nilani. I thought a lot for the names and the blueness of it, the darkness of it. And that, so today it's a film. I mean, it's a half an hour film, of course, with FTI, because they produced it as a project. So 6 students collaborated on the writing. 12 acting students, the graduating batch, participated. That was another challenge, that I had to give a role to everyone.
Hmm.
so so we navigated that, and I'm happy with the result.
And a bit about the photographer.
The
Was it in the?
photographer again. So I these are the kind of things, I'm kind of again a conversation with a friend who was talking about a photographer he knew who was absolutely weird. I mean, he was obsessive. He was a proper like a psychological case. But then some parts of it kind of were interesting, that he was so obsessive about photography
Hmm.
that he would go to any extent, with his models and with his work. He was like obsessed, and the way he would work. So that sort of triggered something, that as a story I could tell something about a person who lives the creative life, as it were. They almost live a double existence. One is you're seeing them as normal people. They sit with you, talk with you, have coffee with you, but they're living another life, an inner life, in their imagination, where they are imagining people. What if this happens, what if that happens, what if, and to them that world is very real. To
Hmm.
you this world is real, that they are sitting and having coffee, but to them this is mundane, like,
Hmm.
this reality is ordinary. Whereas to them, that rich imaginative world in which they are living is a real world in a sort of metaphorical sense. And that the photography is about these two worlds, as it were. The world where the imagined life, which I sort of wanted to say is a rich resonating life. And we sort of deny that. We say that that is that's your imagination. This having coffee is real. So this idea of reality and unreality, I wanted to play with that, and so I wrote that story. And this person was helped me with the funds, and we could make it.
So I read this article or this quote by Godard, which said that you don't. It doesn't matter where you take things from. It matters where you take them to. Right. So
Yeah, that's
now
a
this.
beautiful quotation.
Yeah. So this photographer, for example, if you said like on these two parallel worlds and a schizophrenic person or a bipolar person, these films have been made for like decades, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you bring it to life in your own perspective, what's the difference? It's your storytelling, your perspective, or what goes in a storyteller's mind, that why do they want to
It
share the
is.
same story all over again?
Yeah, see, it is some kind of a personal conviction that arises in you. Then only you should go ahead. I don't think it will be nice if I think that there have been great films made on this and it's a great subject because it has that potential, and so I should make it. That wouldn't be so interesting. It means something to me. It is making some sense to me, and I want to go there, do something with it. Personal level, if it appeals and you work with that material, then I think it's something fresh will come out of it. And what I did in this film is like poetry of Rumi. I blended with it, so it became that was so it is. Maybe so many films have been made, but then to me, I don't know if they did with Rumi. Nobody would have done that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but it's not out of a conscious thing to be different, but it's like
It happens.
if you go within, you'll find your own sources. So Rumi, as a poet, talks about imagination, who talks about certain qualities of the mystical side of life, having there is this thing, I'll meet you in that land, and those
Hmm.
kind of lines. So those sort of resonated. What I did was use his poetry in the form of everyday dialogues.
Hmm.
So the result is interesting because of these things. And then of course cinematography, I played with that, because photography and cinematography, they are like very close.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was able to talk about that also.
Okay. Okay.
About I was able to get, I think, in the mind of a photographer for a while. I mean, in the sense, in that kind of way, what that person must be feeling and how intensely he must be feeling the world around. So that is what is exciting about such work.
I remember I was listening to one long kind of a speech by Dr. Ashok Ranade, the ethnomusicologist, and he said that even every music or every form of performance has like six stages, and the first step is ichha. Like, do you really desire to tell a story? Do you like, does it come organically from or within you? And that's where it starts, and then there are various steps depending on it. So yeah, I think that's what you are pointing to, that it should come very
Organically to
intrinsically,
you,
yeah,
within
organically.
you, something must be, some spring must emerge from within,
Correct,
which
correct, correct.
wants to kind of come out.
Yeah, yeah.
And these external things then have to connect with it.
Mhm.
and then it takes shape. And then of course is a lot of it is, simply your craft.
Mm.
I pay a lot of emphasis on that. Craft is there. I mean, it's not all just, imagination and this, while it's nice to talk about it,
Mm.
but marshal all those things to make it into a proper form and so on.
Mm.
Both at the what I call the material, in the sense the story material, to give it that shape, but also in the actual act of filming, and using all the elements of cinema in a way that it works
Correct.
in that way. So
Mm.
that
Mm.
is, I lay a lot of emphasis on that also.
Yeah, yeah. So because of my editing now, little bit of editing skills, and I've tried some short films here and there back day in college. Like when you compare that with the design that I do today, you can shape things the way you want on the surface, but here it's a very different ball game altogether because you have shot it and now you're on the table. So yeah, I can
It is,
start
yeah.
like being sensitive to it at
Yeah,
least.
there is work there. There is work involved.
Mm-hmm. So, Mazhar, your films often carry a social message also, right? Like Mohandas also in this. So, do you believe filmmakers have a responsibility to have a social commentary to, because if it's intrinsic and somebody is just doing for fun or just loves storytelling.
I think everybody has a responsibility, not just filmmakers. That's where I come from. I think, I mean, I'm an idealist in that sense. I feel everybody has a responsibility. So
Hmm.
for me, the metaphor, which appeals to me is, to make it simple, is of a doctor. That is what I relate to. Am I? We all, everybody has that experience. You see a doctor, you see doctors, very good doctors, they have their private practice, but they also give certain hours to a hospital, a general hospital. They go there dedicatedly, few hours, x number of hours every week. Why are they doing it? They need not do it, but they do it. So I look at it that every individual must give a certain number of hours to such things, which are sort of non-transactional. It's very important to me, and I can't explain it, but I just believe in it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I feel filmmakers also must, but then film is a medium where it's directly a social medium. So then you must bring in that element as a responsible thing, and that you use that medium. It's a very powerful medium. It has been proved time and again. So then use it in that way. So I admire such filmmakers, and I think it should be done. So
Hmm.
most filmmakers I admire are of that kind.
Cham
So,
Benegal types.
no, even Hirani, I would put there. So Hirani is doing it. Bimal Roy, V. Shantaram. V. Shantaram was in his early years. I mean, in British India, he made such films.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
admirable.
Yeah.
Very very grounded. He took up the women's issue at that time, when it was feminism was not a word around. I think, at
Hmm.
least in our it here came much later. He made those films. So even Raj Kapoor in his early years, I mean, through the influence of K. Abbas maybe, but definitely it must have appealed to him. He went into these kind of explorations with Shri 420 and Avara and Barsat. You can see the passion of that artist to raise certain questions. So people have done it, very well,
Yeah. Yeah.
in all kinds, So I think filmmakers. So it's not that we have to say that only certain kind of filmmakers like Mrinal Sen or Benegal are doing those films. Even Rajkumar Hirani is doing those kind of films, where you can see his commitment,
Hmm.
that he takes up a certain idea and explores it through entertainment. It's very clear that he's doing for a certain idea, for a certain belief that he holds dear. So that I would respect in a filmmaker.
So we'll move to the second part of the conversation, which is more because I wanted to speak to you mainly for two things. One is generally understanding your philosophy of storytelling, and also hopefully some helpful takeaways for young filmmakers or designers or any creative practitioners. So a couple of questions around more technical. So when you decide to make a film, or in case of Satya, you're like visualizing a scene, or how does it begin, right? Like, does it begin with a mood? Doesn't begin with a script or the space, or again, as for your like more instinctive? How do you kind of go about thinking about it from a cinematographer's lens for now?
Yeah, you kind of respond to the story overall.
Hmm.
What is the space in which, I mean, you kind of absorb it. When I am not doing much cinematography now because I moved, which is what I wanted to move into my storytelling.
Hmm.
But the years that I gave to working with other people's stories, I would internalize them a lot. I know it very closely, the whole space in which this is happening. So Satya is like a very, it's just Bombay,
Hmm.
and it's very dynamic and it's very real. So, one line brief only Ramu gave, and we never again discussed what it should be. He said, just make it look real, as in it should look like nothing has been done, like it's just
Hmm.
real. You're just, so I said, okay, fine. Of course, then it's not so simple. So, which is what I had to work on to make something look that nothing has been done, requires a lot of doing, otherwise it will be very it won't hold actually. So
Hmm. Hmm.
so that is a mistake people make, but so the it starts with this kind of getting the zone in which is happening, and in particular, say methodically how it would be is take a particular scene, and then if there are options in
Can I
terms of
suggest a scene because I was particularly
uh,
curious about it? There's a scene where Manoj Bajpayee is like eating kheer or something, and his daughter is like sitting and singing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," and the shot is from the top. I
mm,
like
mm.
I don't know whether you'll remember it,
It
but
is
yeah,
in
the
a,
shot in the
I don't
jail.
remember. I'm not able to remember immediately. Is it in a kind of where the lawyer comes to meet him
Yes,
with his
yes,
wife?
yeah, with his wife, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so that image, I there it was about keeping it simple, very simple in terms of its look and feel. I think I was guided by that simplicity of light. Was a defining thing in Satya. I wouldn't complicate matters. It was less is more philosophy. In fact, I remember that word had gone around that this man is using hardly any lights. It was a bit of a shocker for the industry, where truckloads of light were common. Once Mahesh Bhatt came on the set, I asked, I was new, it was my first film, what is he doing here? He said, Ramu has been going on telling that this guy doesn't use much light, so they are intrigued. I was in that zone of less is more,
Hmm.
and I thought people were overdoing it. You could get a lot with that simplicity. So that simplicity, what I'm trying to say, is a technical thing, but it also translates into the image. This is
Hmm.
something one has to sort of grasp. Simplicity also translates into the that you will feel that elegance and that simplicity because it has been done with that kind of
Thought process.
thought process. So
Hmm.
there'll be
Hmm.
just one light coming from somewhere, and very within that everything will happen. So it's
Hmm.
sort of somewhere it works, and that ease and that everydayness of it. So there
Hmm.
I wanted to keep it like, so I wouldn't do some kind of, make things over dramatic. So there are ways you can make things over dramatic with light, with camera, I'm saying. Forget the acting. But cinematography itself can be over
Hmm.
dramatic. So when you strip it of all that and come to something very essential and simple, that does the job.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that is
Yeah.
one. Simplicity would be one, and keeping it very real and not very ornate and overdone, either for glamour or for making it very dramatic. So that was the guiding. So given a choice, two ways. I mean, since you want like very technical approach, I would say that one is to look at a location. Again, the same way, like I said, a story appeals to you, so there is something that a cinematographer responds to. I've seen that time and again. You should work with the cinematographer by taking them through a lot of locations, and cinematographers have that sense. This is a rich location, rich in the sense of cinematography,
Hmm.
and appropriate for the so you may say that this is also a shack and that is also a shack, but a cinematographer will look at it in a very
Very
different
different.
way. So they will be responding to a lot more detail,
Hmm.
and then they will say, no, this shack, not that. So there is a reason. So you have to respect that and then go with that. Now, having done that, so basically it's about choosing, and these are instinctive. If you ask him to explain, it's a waste of time. Because then they'll go into logic. It's not needed. It's a very intuitive thing, and intuition, as you know, is like very evolved knowledge actually.
Hmm.
so
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
so it doesn't happen. So you should just take it at that, and otherwise they'll explain, oh, because of this, because of that. It's all because there is
Unnecessary.
something intangible which is appealing that the person may not be able to explain. It could be just an angle in which the light is hitting, which in one place, nothing to do with the shack or location, maybe. Just the way the light is entering that place and not entering that place could make a difference. So all these sort of a person is able to take very quick calls on location. So it's very, very important to do a, what we call a recce for every location if you can, and always look for options. Second is when you have decided, you kind of when you are actually doing the what we call the shot breakdown, you're actually designing the shots. We sort of cinematographers design shots, sometimes in collaboration, sometimes when the director is not so familiar with the language of cinema but is a good storyteller, may have a good script but may not know the language of film, in terms of, so then the cinematographer helps a lot in designing those shots. So there again, where to shoot it from, how to shoot it from, all those small small decisions add up, and then how many shots to do it, all these decisions add up to your how that scene holds up. I remember in Satya that one scene. So as I said, Satya was my first debut film, and I was approaching everything very tentatively. I didn't want to overstep into Ramu's thing and still maintain my. And he gave a lot of freedom, of course. All credit to him. So there's this scene where these two guys, Manoj Vajpayee and Chakravarti, they threaten the music director by firing a shot at his window, and they want them to take Urmila as a singer. So they do that. And this is late night because it's a night shot. We were shooting at night. I lit it up. We took that shot. Of course, then that cinematography thing is there. So there is a way to create late night and there's a way to create night. There's a difference between 9 p.m. and 12. These things cinematographers can do. So one did all that, and then that mood was Ramu throughout Satya was very excited. I must say that with my work. Yeah, so that was very mutual. I was excited by his story, and he was excited with the way I was doing these things. On a high, I could see that. This scene also, he was very excited when it was lit. There's a certain calmness on him when you do things right. He's like, you can see he won't jump. He'll become very quiet, and just like he'll come and whisper to you. So that is how he worked. We took this shot in one shot, and then he said, pack up. I said, that's it. He said, yeah, that's it. That's all I needed. So this is the magic of working when you kind of get it right with the mood and everything. Then that simplicity works. Then you don't have to labor it. You don't have to take 20 shots, and that integrity of that mood and that action holds together.
Yeah,
So
I remember that the way the what are that Maruti
yeah,
Omni light just lights up
light,
and
yeah,
it
yeah,
just goes away, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it feels, now that you say it, I can relate to it, that it
So although
feels
at that
very.
point I was a bit hesitant because I had spent a lot of effort doing that ground floor lighting, with that
Mm, mm,
Maruti. And I thought he's not even taking one shot of that, just as a
mm.
safety. But I said, okay, he's like this Zen thing, that is all, and that is all. Okay.
Sir, we'll move to last couple of questions.
Yeah.
So, the filmmaker, like at least these days, what I'm observing with reels and YouTube shorts and other forms of media, lot of filmmakers are kind of obsessed with tools and gears, and it also catches fancy, right? Because it feels that you are empowered by these things. So, how do you balance these form?
I would emphasize core values actually. These things don't really help. And
Mm,
we have been excited a lot of times with new stuff coming. This is the next big thing, that is the next big thing. But it all becomes part of our lives. And fundamentally, we kind of adapt to it. What I would emphasize in young people is to keep going to the core values, which are what I mean by that would be, storytelling, literature, your own culture, your own life. That if you can understand better, spend time on that rather than, get excited by all these tools. They don't do much. So I emphasize that actually. A lot of reading. Those are really the great things where people need to work on.
mm,
Whereas these will keep coming, tomorrow there'll be something else and so on. And a lot of this, I see a lot of this virtual reality and all this kind of stuff. People are not able to tell stories. You have all these things, but so I like to emphasize that
mm.
these things can keep shifting, but unless you have a sense of a meaningful thing to say, then these things will help. But otherwise, they just remain your bag of tricks, and that will always be there. Tomorrow there'll be something else. People have been writing, from on stone tablets, etching stories which we can still read with interest. So that's how I think it is.
Beautiful. And do you feel like the new media, the attention span shrinking, should makers or storytellers change?
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
you should. Because you need to connect with your times, is what I would. You must assume that people today are able to absorb a lot more and absorb a lot more quickly. So then you need not labor over certain things that you might have earlier done it. So I think if we ignore
No,
that,
but
it's not.
But for example, I like, does it mean I see a lot of real looking stuff, very raw to a certain extent? If
Hmm.
my aesthetic sense, it looks unpolished, but that just goes away in 1 day, 2 days. It's hardly has any shelf life. So in that case, are we lose? Will we
Hmm.
lose our muscle of, you know what I mean,
Mm.
right? Like,
Yeah, that is a danger. What you're saying, that you, because you have a camera in your hand, you feel empowered. Like, I can make an image.
hmm,
Whereas when it was a little more difficult, then you had to think a lot before you press the trigger. You had to carefully wait. Because then it will get there, and it's got to be developed and printed and all that. So
hmm,
it was very careful decision making. Yeah, I think that does. So one has to discipline yourself, to not get carried away by the ease of it. So yeah, I think there is a need for that caution. So that is what we thought that while it is good and democratic and all that, but then it's not necessary that good things will come out of it.
hmm.
But then I say, that is why I say that if you emphasize the core values, the core learning, the development of the person in terms of understanding his or her culture a little more deeply, then the results will be good.
Because then you'll be very obsessed with what you want to say, and then for that obsession the thing will transpire in a way that I want it this way itself, right? And then you master the craft as we go along.
So
Yeah,
I
i,
think
I
one
can
should
see that.
sort of de-emphasize the tools part of it. If you ask
Hmm,
me that
hmm,
question, I would say that I would de-emphasize that and emphasize
hmm.
the other side.
And you teach popular Indian cinema
Yes,
also, so any reason
it's
or any
there is a reason actually. It's been taken a long while
hmm,
to reach here. I would say this is my journey back, from Herzog to Bimal Roy, Basu Chatterjee, and Hirani. It's like coming back home. So it's my journey back home in a way. And I wanted to do that because I felt that having been part of, I was sort of pulled into the mainstream cinema for a decade. I was there in it, and I've seen that popular cinema very close, like being at the heart of it, and a lot of it worked well with audiences, box office, and so on. And I had worked with those filmmakers and seen that world. And then I thought that, I must talk about this. It won't be correct if I don't talk about it. I have known it very closely, know what it is in practice. Who are these people? It is not some nebulous world. I have known them closely, and I've admired them. I've admired the professionalism. I've admired their conviction, their beliefs, their, belief in the medium, and the way, the hard work that goes into it. So I wanted to bring this as a subject, that popular Indian cinema. Not many people have done it. In fact, when I floated it, the director of FTI, whom I shared a good rapport with, the former director now, very excited. He said, "It's so interesting. You must do it." He encouraged me on this also. So even my course ideas, I kind of bounce off people that
hmm,
I'm thinking of this course. He said, "Excellent, you must do it." What I'm saying is that he said even in at their institute they don't have such a course. So I got into it, taught it twice now. Student interest has been huge. I wasn't sure, but a lot of interest in it. Get good responses, help them in some way, positive things that
hmm,
so it's a
hmm,
kind of, then I realized that, oh, okay, so this is making some meaning to them. It is
hmm,
helping. It is helping in one way that it is changing the way they thought about Indian popular cinema. So now I believe a lot more in it, and I'm going ahead with it, explaining this cinema, what its history has been, what it means, and what is it, what is the form of it. Because if you see the other cinema, which we call world cinema, has been talked about, written
hmm,
about. The film festivals have sort of canonized it and so on.
hmm,
It's become a whole world in itself. A little too much, I feel. That's another thing. I feel it's Those days of that idealism of, say, what through Godar would have gone through, I think they have gone. As with everything, there is a phase. That phase is over. It's now like we are just still beating the same old thing. Whereas I find this popular cinema to be an exciting space. The work of Hirani or of Gavarikar, I consider, or Mani Ratnam, of course. These three directors I would sort of say off the top of my head
Hmm.
are doing very interesting work. So
Neeraj Gaiwan is there.
yes, but I'm more in the popular space.
Popular.
So Mani Ratnam, Ashutosh Gavarikar, and Hirani, the way they are navigating it, full content, powerful content. In fact, dealing with very difficult ideas actually, and dealing with them in this way is admirable.
I remember when I was watching Munna Bhai MBBS, and I think that time we were also doing some side project related to films. And when I was coming back, I said I never realized any shot which was like taken on a trolley, while the entire song Munna Bhai MBBS is like a lot of trolleys around, right? Like the cranes or whatever you call it technically. But
Yeah.
you never, because you're so engrossed in the storytelling that you forget to look at technicalities and, oh, this is a long take shot, oh, this must be like whatever. So you when you start ignoring those details, I think that's a true testament of a
Yes, that
good
is how it should
filmmaker.
be. That is how it should be. You should not
Yeah.
be noticing it actually.
So, sir, I want to finally conclude with one question. Then, what role do you think institutions like FTI or IDC also you're taking shape in storytellers of India? Like, would filmmakers in the future come from a formal academic learning or just pure instinct or curiosity? Where and how do you see the future also?
Yeah, I think that, so if you ask me, I would say there is a way that filmmakers can emerge from both backgrounds, and they have emerged without training of any kind and with training. So you can find remarkable excellent filmmakers who had no film school background, and you can find remarkable excellent filmmakers who have school background. So that sort of doesn't seem to be a criteria. They will emerge from, they have always, and they will continue to emerge. But I would not deny, as some will then say that, oh, there's no need to go to film school. I'll not say that. I will say that film schools are important, are necessary, because it's not a simple medium. It's a simple medium in terms of its instinctive and its approach, but you need to learn, go through a learning process,
Thorough
and
process.
and it is worth doing it. I mean, Bansali went to film school. Hirani, of course, they were around when I was entering FTI, and they were graduating, and they have subsequently shown that they can make good films. And at the training, if you see Hirani's films, there is a certain grammar and which he uses because of that film school, and which comes very automatically, kind of, as it were. Like you said, he may be doing very elaborate setups. Had he not been through film school, maybe he would not have done it. He would still make good popular films. But now, and his team, it's all FTI team, the cinematographers, the sound designers. That's another thing film school does. You create team. My editor, who works on my smallest films to my more ambitious films, also works with Benegal. So we form a team. My sound designer also works with Meera Nair, but will also work with me. Even on a small, low budget film that is my passion project. So this is what, this system is, what is a great thing that FTI is doing. I think FTI has not been acknowledged enough for the contribution that it has done to Indian cinema. I think it deserves a lot of acknowledgement, the way it has shaped up Indian cinema, not just in the artistic films, that too, but also in the mainstream. I mean, look at me, I mean, I went into mainstream. I come from FTI. Otherwise, where would I enter films making? There was no scope. It's because of my FTI training, my learning, I got an opportunity. Because my first film, how did I get that opportunity? Because the first film that I had done, and a half an hour film, soon after graduating, caught the eye of some people as being very interesting, simple, elegant, realistic work. That became my calling. So when they were looking for somebody who could do simple, interesting, realistic work, my name cropped up. FTI did that. And then Satya, I mean, everybody knows that, sort of had a impact. Now, where does that come from? Because of the experiments I did in FTI. If I had not done those experiments, which FTI allowed me the ground to experiment because of my interest in natural filming, I was able to apply it there, whereas if I had come through the industry, I would never even think of doing these kind of things which I told you, that you can shoot with one light. Industry, I would not have imagined it, perhaps, and why should I imagine it when all the resources are there? But because of this background
Training.
and so on, and I saw the benefits of that, which are more subtler, like I say, that if I'm approaching it with a certain simplicity of technique, that will get transmitted. Now these are certain philosophical beliefs, but they do work. So this is what film school do, and I think they should be acknowledged more. And instead of saying, that, oh, just because directors come without any training and they become great, that you don't need film schools. No, you need film schools, and they are important.
Cool. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more question, which is again out of the
Sure.
script, and I'm very intrigued to ask. I was going through your website, and you said father from a science background and mother from a spiritual background. How do you see cinema 100 years from now?
As a bridge, playing this role, and it is an important role, as a bridge between people and between domains, like you said, science, spirituality, art. I mean, these are all compartments, and cinema is one which can bridge,
Wow.
which is more holistic and which flows very freely. And more importantly, I mean, it's a hope which has not been justified so far. The hope we began with, that cinema will bridge people, and cultures. When we were learning cinema, it was an idealistic period. We thought, what a wonderful medium, I don't need to know the language. I don't need to know Japanese culture or Japanese language. But I watch a film from Japan and it speaks to me. It speaks to me, there's no problem. Or from Iran or from Russia. Otherwise, I had to read translations of Tolstoy in my mother tongue, Urdu, to make sense of it, which I did. But then somebody had to translate it first. But here it was so simple. I mean, I'm still seeing the original expression. Yes, it's subtitle, but that's not the major part of it. The major part is what is happening on the screen with actors, the whole cinematic language, and that is 90% of it, And this translation of language is like, okay, it can be managed. So I hope that dream, that thing comes true, that when you see that, okay, the Japanese people, the Russian, the Iranians, Americans, in their day-to-day life, in their everydayness, they are no different from us. They want the same things, they wish for the same things, they live for the same things, and that should bring the world closer. But unfortunately, that is not happening. We are going in some other direction, which we don't know. But cinema should play this role to show truly that that solidarity is needed. Because
Mm.
you are the same. So that is what cinema uniquely does it, because it doesn't happen. I mean, there has been world literature, people read in translation, but cinema has a certain what has always appealed to me. That because the first film I saw was a German film, so that thing of a direct appeal to you, is as it were there was no barrier. It sort of breaks all those barriers and it just directly speaks to you from some very different language, some very different culture, at some very different stage of development. So that magic, I think it will retain. Hope it will do something in this direction in 100 years.
Because like if you watch also Iranian films, and if they are like not banned in certain countries and they're like not just restricted to festivals but opened up in normal theater, they're just mesmerizing, right? Like the
Yeah, absolutely.
storytelling.
Imagine a separation wins in Berlin, and in the US, in San Francisco, people find so much meaning in that film or
Yeah.
separation. Asghar Farhadi said that, he was very touched. Soon after that screening, two women came up to him and said, "Thank you. No, you just saved our marriage."
Wow.
Because they were in court fighting over custody. And
Mm.
this film changed that, no, 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 let's not do that.
Wow.
So across cultures, I mean, they are almost like they see each other as enemies, but the people are not enemies. So that is something unique to cinema, the way it can connect people. In their essences. That is what we should admire it for, and work.
Absolutely. I think on that good note, that cinema builds becomes a bridge for 100 years. And thanks,
Thank
Mazhar,
you.
for
It
giving your
was
time.
nice, wonderful talking to you. Thank you.
Yes. Same, Yaman. Thank you. I hope to have you again on the show. So thanks once again. That was one of those conversations that stays with you. Talking to Mazhar felt like an interview of more like sitting with someone who's been quietly observing the world and shaping stories from stillness. From Satya to Safar mein Sheher, from cinematography to education, his thoughts made me rethink how we tell stories and why even we tell them. What did you feel while watching that? I would love to hear. Please drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this meaningful, please subscribe to the GAN project on our website to stay in the loop for future episodes. And follow us on social media for curated bites and takeaways from every episode. All links are right below in the show notes. Thanks for watching till the end. See you in the next one.